Teacher Workflow. My name is Martha Thibodeau. I'm an MLTI ambassador for the Maine Department of Education. Today we're going to be talking about the definition and a few examples of teacher workflow. And then we're going to have a conversation with Kate Meyer, a teacher who has been doing blended learning in her classroom for quite a while. And she'll take us through a few sample teacher workflows that she says have brought magic to her classroom. So first, let's define teacher workflow. So according to TechTarget, a workflow is a series of activities that are necessary to complete a task. Teachers have a lot of workflows. Whether we're planning lessons or creating routines, curating resources, assessing students, giving feedback, we have so many workflows. How can we get a handle on those? Well, let's take a look at an example of a teacher workflow in a traditional classroom where this might happen. So you hand out the work, you collect the work, you grade the work, and you pass back the work. And the students take a look at that grade and then usually hit the recycle bin on the way out, especially as you get to the middle and high school. That is, the grade becomes the all-important piece instead of the process that the students use to get to that point. Now let's look at an example of a teacher workflow in a blended learning classroom. In a blended learning classroom, the students may have done some homework, and then when they come back in, the teacher gets them into small groups, hands them an answer key, and then it's up to the students to take a look at incorrect answers and attempt to correct them with the help of other students. So they're having a conversation around errors that were made and why certain errors were made. And then there's a Google form, perhaps, that students report their scores and ask for whatever help they may need. And then, so instead of the teacher collecting all of these and spending hours grading homework, the teacher goes to this Google form results and can then plan how to help individual students based on what they ask for. During this small group time, the teacher isn't just sitting back and letting things happen. They are an active participant in these small groups, going from small group to small group, asking about errors, how they got to that answer, how they are going to correct that answer, what do they see as the pattern of errors on their papers. So there's all kinds of formative assessment going on during that time, and not simply answer number 5 is 6.3, answer number 6 is 7 3/4, and the students marking their papers. So let's now have a conversation with Kate and find out from her what kind of teacher workflows benefit her students and bring her parents actually more into the know about what's going on in the classroom. All right, so we're here with Kate Meyer. And Kate, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and just telling us how long you've been using blended learning in the classroom.
Sure. I'm Kate Meyer. As Martha said, I teach English and design thinking at Mount Desert Island High School in Bar Harbor. And I've been doing pieces of blended learning for 19 years, really, since our school went to one-to-one laptops, and really fully doing what I consider kind of the full experience of blended learning since remote learning in 2020.
Great. So, what drew you to blended learning? Why did you start blended learning in the first place?
So blended learning solves a lot of problems that I was seeing in the classroom. And as it turns out, like I said, I've been doing pieces of it for about 19 years, and I was doing it mostly without knowing that I was doing blended learning. So I would see my students disengage, and I would try to re-engage them with the station rotation model without knowing that it had a name outside of stations, because I knew that was a model, elementary teachers used. And because we have been a one-to-one laptop school for almost my entire teaching career, it was very easy for me to integrate, technology into those stations. So really, I was doing the model to solve problem of disengagement. And then it became, as I became more confident as an educator and with my content, I became more confident in the idea of letting go of control of my classroom, which for my first maybe even decade, I held like a pretty tight control over everything. I led the discussions. I was doing the bulk of the work, and I came to understand that those doing the bulk of the work were doing the bulk of the learning. And so I really wanted to turn that over to my students, and have them doing the bulk of the work, and give them choices and empower them with choices and agency that they were not getting with my kind of tightly controlled experience in the classroom. So doing all of the different pieces of blended learning before I finally put them all together in one package, really a few years ago, allowed me to solve all those problems as I was making my way through my career.
Great, thank you. Um, we talked a little bit about side by side assessments. Could you walk us through what that is?
Yeah. This is one of, I'm going to say this about everything today. This is one of my favorite parts about blended learning, but there are some really exciting pieces of blended learning outside of the models, the things that the models allow us to do. And side by side assessment is one of those things that blended learning really can allow us to dig into. So it solved a problem again. So what was happening is I was giving an assessment, let's say an essay. I would assign it, my students would write it, they would give it to me, I would score it, give them feedback. Hours and hours and hours on Sundays were spent, giving feedback on essays. I would return the essays and say, let's conference, let's do revisions, it's up to you. Here's your score, here's your feedback, do with that what you will. And no one was reading my feedback, and very few revisions were coming back to me. And it took me a while before I realized, again, that the feedback, that formative assessment, really is better off earlier in the process. And by the time we get to the point where we're scoring it, the student and I should pretty much know what that score is based on our work along the way. So again, side-by-side assessment has solved that problem and a couple of other problems that I'll mention kind of as I talk about it. So now the workflow for an assessment, instead of I assign it, they write it, I give feedback, and it potentially stops with them after that, is I assign it, they write it in the classroom while I give formative assessment, using blended learning to open up that space in my class period to go around and conference with students or do small group conferences with students. When they are ready to submit it for a score, after all of that, all of that work, it sounds like it's very quick, but that's days of work. They take the rubric, they score themselves, and I have them color coded. So we do everything electronically. So they're in a Google Doc. So they have the rubric in a Google Doc. They maybe highlight the first standard, say they got a 3, they're going to highlight that in purple. And the evidence that they want me to see in their essay that demonstrates that they got a 3, they also highlight in purple. So they are looking at the rubric, identifying the evidence that supports their self-assessment. And then they're answering 3 questions for me. What are you most proud of in this piece? Why did you score yourself the way you did? And what evidence do you have? And if you were to revise, what would you do differently next time? And again, first of all, it's incredibly metacognitive. They're thinking about the way they learn as they're scoring themselves. They're also giving themselves a score To which then I just respond. So I use a Chrome extension called Moat, and I give feedback on their self-assessment, basically. So by the time they're getting that kind of, that summative assessment for me, it's a lot of me saying, I see yourself a 3 here, and you identified this area. I also see it in maybe this paragraph here. So great job there. I totally agree with you on your score of a 3, or I might say I don't agree with you. I think maybe even it's a 4, and here's why I think it's a 4. Or, oh, I think you kind of missed something here, so it's a 2, and here's why I think that, and here's how you could move that to a 3. So my feedback is really based on, do I agree with you or disagree with you on your self-assessment? So it solves that problem of students going, I don't know why I got a 3, because in high school, there's a lot of that. And also, it really eliminated parent communication where parents were confused. Why did Johnny get a 2 on this assessment? And I can say, oh, why don't you ask Johnny? Tell him it's number 33. He could pull that up and show you his self-assessment. He can tell you why he got that. So that really the communication is happening between the student and the parent. Again, just really to give a sense of ownership to the student, that they really own their learning, they own their process, they know what's going on in the classroom. So it really, for me, has solved quite a few problems.
That's awesome. Thank you. Now, you talked a little bit about metacognition. How do you provide time in your class for this metacognition to happen and for goal setting with your students?
In my class, it starts right on day 1, really. I give a student survey, just like many teachers give student surveys to learn about their students as quickly as possible right away. So I ask them questions that are metacognitive in nature. So I ask them, how will I know when you need help when it comes to the reading in this class? Or how am I going to know when you need help when it comes to writing in this class? What's that going to look like from you? Because I get great answers like, oh, it'll look like I'm shutting down. It'll look like I'm not reading, right? They'll tell me like, oh, I know what it looks like and feels like when I'm struggling. And then I ask them, what kind of help would you like from me? Because some students want me to leave them alone. Some students want me to come over and really help them massage things out. And so having them think about how they're going to communicate that with me, again, is incredibly metacognitive in terms of knowing their own process. Right. I ask them, if you're frustrated or angry or experiencing anxiety, how can I best help you with that? And I ask them, how can a teacher be a good teacher for you? So that's all about them and their process. So that's day 1 information that I'm collecting. And then I spend a little time in the first couple of weeks talking about metacognition, what it is, why it's important. I tell my students are older, I work with mostly juniors, but I tell them, I think school is really about learning how to learn. So that's what metacognition is. It's really learning about who you are as a learner and how you learn best, so that when you go out into the big world, you can learn whatever you would like to learn. It's really kind of limitless once you know yourself as a learner. And then we set goals. I talk about SMART goals. I find, having that kind of protocol of writing out a SMART goal is concrete for them. And then I'm on a semester system at my school, so I have my students for 18 weeks. So my units run about 4 weeks long. So at the end of every unit, we pause and we look at, okay, what goals did we set? Did we meet them or not? What goals are we going to carry forward? Or what new goals are we going to set for ourselves for our next unit? So it's fast. It doesn't take a ton of time. The first time we do SMART goals takes a little bit longer because I spend some time introducing them to the concept and how to write them. But after that, they pretty much have it. And so we can spend, 10 minutes in class looking at our work from the unit and then deciding where we're headed with the next unit.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'm just going to pause here for a second because my allergies are killing me. Hang on.
Absolutely.
You would think in the middle of December we wouldn't.
I know. It's unbelievable. It was like this last year too. We were all like hacking and coughing with allergies almost the entire year.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, drink would be good. Hopefully you won't see the tear running down my face and hearing one of your answers. I'm crying because your answer is so profound. Okay. I think we're back. Whew. All right. So the next one is going to be parents. Okay. So we know that parents are like the third leg of this learning triad, and you mentioned how students reach out to parents, and so can you tell me a little bit more about how that works?
Absolutely. That's something else that starts at the beginning of the year. Pretty quickly, within that first week of class, I spend some time talking to my students about how to write an email. And so my little mini unit is called How to Write an Email to Get What You Want. And I share some stories from my personal experience where, I've maybe been in a heated moment, but I've calmed down and spent time crafting an email so that the respondent will respond potentially in a way that I would want them to, because often students will email us when they are frustrated or angry, and it's sometimes hard to respond in a way that they want you to. They're often looking for something, but sometimes that's not clear. So we spend some time doing that. We talk about how to craft an email, to a teacher when you are looking for something and seeking a certain response. And then we transfer that to their families. So um, again, bi-weekly, students self-report to their parents or guardians about their progress in class via email, and they CC me in the email. So the conversation is between the student and the parent and guardian, not between me and the parent, not between me and the student. I'm simply watching the conversation, and I'll answer questions, of course, if parents have them, but they often just respond to their child, and the conversation goes that way, and I get to watch that unfold, and it's always quite nice. Every other Friday, we spend 10 minutes, and it's very scripted, it's templatey as students get more comfortable with doing it, because they're quite uncomfortable at first having this communication with their parents or guardians. Once they get more comfortable, some of them expand outside the template, and some of them ever do, and that's fine. So on the board, I write out the template, dear blank, right? So they fill in their guardians, however they address them. In American Lit, we are working on, so they tell their parents a little bit about what they're studying in the moment. I'm currently caught up, or they can put, I need to catch up on, and then they can put in there what they need to catch up on, and I will be fully caught up by, and they put in a date that the student and I have agreed to ahead of time. And so they're telling their parent, I'm going to take responsibility for this, and I'm caught up. Love, student, right? And we talk about how it's not a punishment, because at first it feels a little bit like Ms. Meyer's punishing me by making me email my parents and telling them that I'm not caught up. And it's not. It's again all about taking ownership of their learning and their progress. And we also talk about how taking ownership isn't about apologizing. It's not about making excuses. So they don't have to say, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm behind, and I'm behind because of all of these reasons. Like, they don't have to do that. They can be empowered to just say, yep, I'm behind. Here's what I'm behind on, and I'm going to get caught up. We also do growth emails, so parents can see how I'm coaching their students, their kids, in terms of growth. But again, the students get to write those emails themselves, so it's much more empowering for them. And so it's another template. So, dear parent or guardian, Ms. Meyer has asked me to send you an update on my progress in American Lit. I'm really proud of my work on whatever it is that they're proud of. They give specific examples. Some of the students even share a copy of the assessment or the work that they're doing, so their parents can see it. Ms. Meyer said she has really seen growth and they fill that blank in based on our conversations that we're having. And then they say, I plan to continue, or I hope to keep improving by, and then filling that in as well. And so we do those growth emails, and we also do those progress emails. But that really keeps an open line of communication in the classroom with the parents and guardians, and then again puts that ownership on the students, so they own that process.
That's fabulous. I'd love to ask just one follow-up question on that. Has that changed your parent conferences at all?
Yes. Parent conferences have always been so uncomfortable for me. They happen 4 weeks into the course. I don't necessarily know, everything about their child yet that they might want to hear about. But at that point, they have already gotten one email from their student. So that gives us a place to start and to start talking about student work. And by the time a parent comes in to meet with me, they already are getting a sense of how the class is going for their students. So they're not coming in kind of blind, finding out that, oh my gosh, my student hasn't done anything, or oh my gosh, my student's a complete rock star. They kind of already know by the time they get to me, because they've heard from their child how it's going. So I find that it gives more student voice even in a parent teacher conference where I don't often have students attending. So I think that it's been really helpful in that way.
Great, thanks. Do you want to add anything else about how blended learning has changed your classroom or anything like that?
I would say don't focus so much on the models and perfecting them. I think the models are perfect structures to build in all of the time to do these things we talked about today. And I think the things we talked about today are the really magical pieces of blended learning. Like I said, I've been doing blended learning for 19 years without realizing that that's what I was doing. But kind of these magical pieces didn't start until right around 2020. So the models will allow you to get here, but I think getting to these points is the really magical place, because this is where students develop agency when it comes to their own learning. And I think that is just maybe the most important part of education.
I agree. I want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate having you share your experiences with us. It's one thing to read a book or listen to podcasts or anything, but it's another to actually hear directly from a teacher. So thank you very much, Kate. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Reach out to me with any further questions at martha.thibodeau@maine.gov, and I'm sure Kate would be happy to answer questions. She is also an MLT ambassador for the remainder of this year, so feel free to reach out to her, Catherine.Meyer@maine.gov. Thank you very much for joining us. Looking forward to next week's video, which will talk about the resources that can help you accomplish some of these things that we've talked about so far in the first 2 videos.